So risk is defined as an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or a negative effect on one or more of the project's objectives. So for instance, you're managing a gas pipeline expansion project in Canada. The project funds are allocated in US dollars, even though most of the expenses are in Canadian dollars. Exchange fluctuations are a risk to the project budget. Shortly after the project starts, the Canadian dollar depreciates significantly, which contributes to a budget surplus. This is an example of a positive risk. If a major storm delays the construction of the commercial office tower, the project timelines may be delayed. This is an example of a negative risk. So let's look at two levels. We've got individual risk, and then we have overall project risk. So on an individual, if something happens, it can affect one or more of the project objectives. Overall, it is the effect of uncertainty on the project as a whole, arising from all sources of uncertainty, including individual risk, representing the exposure of stakeholders to the implications and variations in project outcome, both positive and negative. Let's talk about risk management. So we have non-event risks. So some of the risk involves, or some of the evolving trends in project risk. So we have variability risk. Uncertainty exists because key characteristics of a planned event or activity or decision. So an example would be over or under productivity, high or low defects, or unseasonable weather conditions. Talk about ambiguity risks. This comes from having areas or having areas that are not clearly defined, or governance that's not clearly defined, or complexity where you don't have the necessary skill set. And so not having a full understanding means that risk could lurk that you're unaware of. They're just not, they're ambiguous. We talk about project resilience. We're talking about having the right levels of budget, having flexible process. We talk about having a team that's basically empowered to make rapid decisions based on their area of expertise. And we're talking about having clear input from stakeholders so that they understand the risk and they give you latitude to move inside of certain practices in order to counter the risk. And then we talk about integrated risk management, which is a program level, which is delegated to the team, and then a project level risk, which can be escalated to higher levels. So we talk about project risk management and tailoring. You got all kinds of things that come into effect. What's the size of the budget, the duration, the scope, the team size? How complex is your project? What innovations or technologies are you using or can be utilized? What's the importance of the project? Is it a high importance or a low importance? Is there a potential of having a positive breakthrough to discover something that may be beneficial for the business? And then, okay, so what's your development approach to it? Are you going to do more of a sequential waterfall project, or are you going to do more iterative to allow you to constantly adapt throughout the life cycle with regards to risk? So understand that if you're doing a large waterfall linear project, you're going to need to plan risk in advance to be ready for them. In an agile approach, you're doing small little bite-sized, little small sprints, as you call them. So at the beginning of each sprint, you can evaluate where you were at the end of the last sprint. And then any new risks that seem to appear or may be uncovered, you can quickly adapt plans to them. So when we talk about agile worlds, we talked a little bit about what I just covered with the iterative. And that's where your risk analysis and management is done during each review, or excuse me, during your review at each of the sprints, because we have these retrospectives that we talked about that. And then, of course, you can reshuffle work based on risks. That's the good thing about having a prioritized backlog in the agile adaptive world is if you need to reallocate the importance of work, you certainly have the flexibility to do that. So we're going to talk about some key terms. Negative risks are known as threats. Positives are known as opportunities. A risk can have a negative consequence. Only a negative consequence is called a pure risk. A risk that can have a positive or negative consequence is called a business risk. Being a risk adverse means you do not want to take risk. Remember, after a risk occurs, it's no longer an uncertain event or condition. It becomes an issue. The issue should be resolved immediately or have a workaround identified.